on this computer. Cool.
Alrighty, hello everybody. Give me a little thumbs up just to check everyone can hear, everyone can see. Yeah, thank you, Laura. Amazing. Essentially, what we're going to be doing today, just in terms of the Zoom etiquette, I know you probably all heard this before, but we're going to be recording the first bit, which is a bit of a presentation about the clerkship process, and then our panelists will join us in about 20 minutes, and we won't be recording that bit. So if you do have questions in the meantime, feel free to pop them in the chat. We'll definitely get to them, but maybe hold off interrupting or asking them until a little bit later, just for the sake of the recording. So if there's no questions about the session or how this is going to run before we get started, I might dive straight in. So welcome, thank you for coming and joining us today to talk about clerkships. I'd like to start today's session, although we are meeting in a virtually constructed way, I would still like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that I am meeting on today, and I assume many of us are also meeting on today, which is the Turrbal and Yagara people, and on behalf of the QUTLS Law Society, pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge on behalf of the QTLS, the important role the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people continue to play in our broader QUT community. So what's going to happen today? We're going to go through quite a lot. It's going to be quite quick. That's why we're recording it though, so that you can come back afterwards and also ask questions in our panel later. But we're going to cover from step one, what is a clerkship? What does it mean? We're going to talk in quite a lot of detail about the application process, which I imagine a lot of you are going through at the moment. We're going to give you specific tips about how to do your cover letters and resumes, at least from our perspective as students and people who've just gone through the process. Then we'll talk about interviewing and get onto our Q&A with our current clerks, which is very exciting. Bit about me, just in terms of why am I qualified at all to talk. Obviously, I do not work in HR, I am still a student, but this is something that since we lost Lee Moy as our faculty counsellor when it comes to all things clerkships, the faculty are very happy for us to step in and do whatever we can to give you a bit of advice. So I am currently the president of the QTLS, but I also was the director of education last year, which means I ran basically all of our clerkship education networking things. So I've heard a lot of the spiels and a lot of the things to do with clerkships. I've also myself just been going through the clerkship process. So as you can see, I was a clerk at Cause in the employment team, and then also recently, as in literally last week, finished my clerkship at Allens in construction disputes. And I also work at Allens as a paralegal in projects. Moving right on from me, because no one likes staring right at their face. So what is a clerkship? Step number one, it is a 3 to 4 week, usually 4 week work experience opportunity where you get to go inside a commercial law firm and do the work of a grad or a junior lawyer in a certain team. They are usually available just to students in their penultimate, which is their last but 1 year, or 2 people in their final year. In this case, the general sort of QLS guidelines when it comes to clerkships generally refer to the penultimate experience, but there are other ones available as well. They are also offered by all of the top tier law firms in the commercial sphere and the majority of the mid-tier commercial law firms. If you're not quite sure of that distinction, feel free to pop that down as a question and we'll get to that later. But also in terms of when you can do them, and you might hear buzzwords like seasons. Essentially, seasons are when the clerkships take place because each firm offers more than one group of clerkships per year. So even though most firms won't do all 4 of these, you can generally look for opportunities in summer 1, which is November to December, summer 2, January to February, autumn, which is April to May, noting that that one is during semester. Probably not the most fun, but definitely still available for you if it suits you. And then winter, which is June, July. Some of those are finishing up at the moment, if that gives you some kind of indication of the timing. Moving right along, I told you this was going to be fast. In terms of the firms that offer them, in case there's a little bit of concern or confusion about what commercial law means or what kind of work you might be looking at, I guess the best way to define these firms is by what they don't do. They do a lot of things, but they don't tend to do criminal law, they don't do family law, don't usually do immigration and human rights, and they don't do things like wills and estate and succession as much as specialist firms do. Commercial law does, however, include a lot of different things, which I'll cover in this slide right here. So I might not read them all, but just to give you a kind of tasting plate of what these look like. These are very broad umbrellas of what commercial firms do. It also differs massively between firms. Some might offer really big employment teams, some might not have one, some might be really known for their construction, some might not have a really big construction team. So it's always worth having a look and getting a sense of what they're known for. But these are generally the umbrellas that you might be looking for, and you might want to do some research on. So things like mergers and acquisitions is what M&A stands for. Things like disputes is your sort of broader litigation, courts, alternative dispute resolution. They all come under that umbrella. And then your sort of smaller teams, usually like tech, environment and planning, etc. So probably won't dwell on those much further, but just so that you're across what you're kind of looking at when it comes to clerking, this is the kind of law that you probably be doing. If that doesn't float your boat, maybe the clerkship isn't the process you want to be doing, and that's totally fine. There's lots of other ways to get involved in things like the DPP, they do an internship, or consulting, all of those things you might want to look into as well if this is absolutely not what you want to do. Hopefully it is though, because that's what we're going to be talking about for the next hour or so. Moving then to our application process. So as many of you may know, the applications have opened as of this week, so you can get cracking with those cover letters and getting things submitted and all ticked off in your Excel spreadsheets. So they open this week, they close on, I think it's Friday the 12th of August, it's definitely the 12th of August. Once that's in, you'll be contacted about whether you're going to proceed. On the assumption that you are proceeding, you might get sent some kind of testing, it might be a video interview, there might be some other activity or personality questionnaire. It really varies by firm, but there might be something you have to do between application and interview, hence why I've made it a separate little step. Then the big gun, the interview. This is usually just one round for most firms. A couple of them do a couple of rounds. We'll talk about it in more depth. I think you all know what an interview is, but that's your stage 3. And then stage 4, offer day, that is the day you'll get a phone call saying, yeah, we'd love to have you. And you may have to make some uncomfortable decisions about who you're going to pursue, who you're not going to. There may be tears, maybe an absolutely wonderful day, all the good stuff, stage 4. So let's break them down. Into stage 1 then. So the one all of you are probably going through right now, or if you're doing it next year, the first one you'll be engaging with when you do get stuck into it. What you'll need to do will vary by firm, so please always check what the firm is asking for. Do not use me as like the gospel when it comes to submitting things, but generally what they will ask you for is a current CV, so your resume. They will generally ask you for a current academic transcript. Usually informal is fine, but you absolutely should check. I know at least one firm I applied for wanted a formal one, and they are not the quickest process to apply for. So just as with all things clerkship, the earlier you can look into it, the better. But yep, get your transcript sorted. Generally, you might need a cover letter or content that you would put into a cover letter. I'll explain what I mean by that later, but always check because some of them don't really care and some of them absolutely do want a cover letter. Some of them may have lots of questions for you to answer. Sometimes this is instead of the cover letter and they're just kind of guiding you towards the things you would otherwise have written in your cover letter. So things like, why do you want to be in commercial law, or what inspired you to be in law in the first place, or I'm trying to think back a year, what is a big issue in the law that you care about, things like that. So that might be something you need to do. If so, I would definitely flag it early in your application process because they tend to be some of the bigger time drains. And then otherwise you might have to do some kind of activity. So some things we did last year were like drafting emails, doing some research to mimic what you would actually be doing on clerkship. Some others got like behavioral scenarios and kind of made you rank how you would respond, what you were more likely to do and less likely to do in a scenario. It's all over the shop. It's very different at each different firm. So always check in quite early in the process so you know how to break down your time and what you're going to need to do. In terms of things you generally have to do at all firms, so preparing a resume, my big tip here personally is it takes longer than you might think to get a resume together that you're really happy with, because generally your resume is going to have to be 2 pages. Again, check the firm, but I know mine definitely last year was 2 pages, I think, everywhere that I submitted, and that was harder than you might expect to make sure you get everything that you think is useful in a neat, easy to read, sort of persuasive format. And given that's what you're going to be submitting to everybody, and it's one of the first things they read when they decide to keep looking at you or to drop you out of the pile, it's a really good one to put your energy into at the start of the process. So in terms of how to put your best foot forward, the sort of thing you definitely need to be putting on your resume are the things you can see on the screen. So when did you start your degree? When are you planning to graduate? That's really important because they want to know when you're likely to be a grad. They want to know what degree you do. So for me, law and psychology. They want to know what your GPA is. And in particular, if you do a dual degree, they want to know what your law GPA is. So at least in my case, I had my combined one, my law one, my psychology. I suppose you might just want to put your two separate ones, but definitely give them your law GPA. You might want to put on things like awards. So if you have been fortunate enough to get onto the Dean's List or you've won a subject prize, that's absolutely incredible. And you should absolutely be talking about that right at the top. And you absolutely want to speak about any professional experience that you have, whether that is in the law or in something else. At the end of the day, at least from what I have been told, they want to look at your ability to show up, be organized, be reliable, be part of a team, work under pressure. All of those things can be done outside of the law as well. So if you worked at QUTLS for 5 years, they definitely want to hear about that. If you worked at McDonald's, they definitely want to hear about that because lots of those skills can still be acquired and still be really helpful to getting you in the door for a clerkship. Other things then, so probably not essential, but depending on what your vibe is and how you're sort of selling your own personal story. In my case, I put a lot of extracurricular things on. So if you've done competitions, whether that's sport, debating, whatever it is, and it shows you in a really positive light, definitely something to whack onto your application. If you've done things like mooting competitions, if you've got diplomas and things like music or speech and drama, all of those things show that you can train and dedicate your time to a very high level, and you absolutely should talk about them. You also should talk about any community work or volunteer work you've done. So if you are on the executive committee like the Law Society or Women in Business or QUT Connect, whatever it is, always mention those kinds of things. It shows great teamwork, great volunteer spirit, great initiative taking, and all of those things are very, very helpful. Yeah, also mentorship. If you work at a sports club and you help with the younger teams after you've played your games, that's the sort of thing they also want to hear about, even if it doesn't jump to the top of your mind as being something that's employable. Cool. Moving then to length and format of your resume. Apologies for how fast we're moving, but there is so much to try and cover before we can get to our Q&A. So firms are usually looking for 2 pages, but you absolutely should just check. Don't confine yourself if you don't need to. You also want to make sure that you can read it and that it's neat. So I went back and looked at mine. I probably did have quite small font. It was size 10, but I reckon go no smaller than that. You want to make sure it's professional and easy to read. So things like Times New Roman, Arial font, etc., all very agreed upon professional looking fonts. You want to make sure there's headings so it's easy to guide you through. You want to make sure there's enough space so people aren't completely overwhelmed. Other than that, I guess use your own initiative. If you can read it, maybe give it to some friends and family, check they can read it, and get rid of anything that's a bit glaring or makes you, think twice about putting you through as a great candidate. Cool. Moving on to cover letters. These can be very different for different people. It makes sense. We are all different people. We have different stories to tell, but fun always told, and which seemed to work for me, was talking about who are you? So things like, in my case, a summary of who I am. So I'd say I'm Bella. I'm a final year student studying a Bachelor of Law and Behavioral Science. I'm president of the Law Society. I work part-time as a paralegal. I am a debating coach, and I also enjoy playing cello in the Legal Forecast Orchestra. So really big combined quick summary of what you're doing at uni, what your jobs are, what your interests are, and a little bit more about you as a broader person. Then you want to speak to why specifically commercial law is for you. So in my case, I said something very buzzwordy, but still somewhat true about loving the interplay between social, legal, economic issues. And then I linked it to my experience in debating. Then I inserted a big spiel about the knowledge and experience debating gave me, transferable skills for commercial law, working under pressure, reading widely, finding politics and, social issues interesting. Whatever it is for you, do a little spiel and try and make it as authentic as you can. And then finally, the big guns, they really want to know why you want to work at their firm. I think a lot of people are worried that they don't have the insight into the firm to be able to say something very authentic. And I think that's pretty normal. But I think as much as possible, if you can try and do your research and try and whittle down what does appeal to you and what gives you a genuine interest, that's what they want to hear about. So I know a lot of people wrote about things like pro bono, and they found specific initiatives that certain firms were doing and, said that really resonates with me because of my work in this space. Maybe they were, a coach, and they said these education initiatives really appeal to me because of my mentorship and my experience coaching this, and this. Maybe it was because you were really interested in the innovation that was taking place and you'd done work. And the more specific you can be to the firm, the better it tends to be for your chances, because they appreciate the work and the time you put into learning about them and what they do and trying to find something that links you and them together. That one I think is pretty hard, but whatever you can find, definitely trust yourself and just go with it. I found I was copying a little bit from a couple of different firms, but I still always tried to make sure it was this specific pro bono initiative or this specific philanthropy thing they were doing. So it always was still very specific to that firm. Moving then to, what does set firms apart? I found this really difficult, so I was hoping to try and make it a bit easier for you guys with the little experience that I have from the past year. Things that seem to differ between firms are these things. So they have different practice groups. For instance, some firms have employment, others don't. Some have arbitration, some don't. If you're super interested in one of those things, you should definitely find the firms that do them and really speak to the fact that you want to do that. You're really interested in it, really passionate, etc. And you know that they have a really big practice in that type of thing. If you want to travel as part of your job, so if you're interested in like international secondments, that is definitely something you should play to and talk about. Obviously, check the firm does it. A lot of firms are national firms, but if it is an international firm or a firm with international alliances, you should always speak to that and explain why you have that interest, how you've demonstrated it, and how you could, fit together as a good synergy between you and them. If you have pro bono experience or you're really interested in social justice causes, find things they're doing, link it to what you're doing and why you want to get involved in those programs. Maybe you like their culture. So for instance, they may have a commitment to diversity or to reconciliation action. You might have experiences where those are really important to you and they really resonate with you. If so, definitely speak to that and how you can contribute to that broader culture when you get there. Similarly, a lot of firms are looking into the innovation space. So they have things like startup clinics, or branches of their firm are dedicated to doing things like disrupting law, hackathons, changing the way they think, and like legal design thinking. Maybe that's something you've studied at uni. I know particularly at QUT, that's something we do kind of to the exclusion of other places. That might be a really cool approach for you to take with those firms that are looking more into that space. But always find something that works for you and is authentic to you, but those are some good places to start. Finally, then, on cover letters, just a little bit on formatting. Feel free to take a screenshot if you'd like to, because I probably won't be on the screen for very long. You always want to make sure you leave space. I know it is tempting to get rid of some of these things so that you can use more of your one-page limit on your letter, but you should always make sure it is neat and following letter conventions. So top right-hand corner, your details, then sort of top-ish left-hand corner, their details, then you have the date, then you address it to them and have some kind of title. So this was one of mine from last year. Obviously, I redacted my information and changed all their information, but that is literally what my layout looked like and seemed to work for me. And it was what I was told to do. So this is what I'm advising in my experience. Obviously, if you have other ones that you can look at from past clerks, or you have people who know how to write these sorts of things, feel free to look at them as well for comparison. All right, final things in your application. So this is quite a big part of the process. So you may also have to answer questions either in addition to or instead of your cover letter. My advice on this that was given to me by HR people and that I really agree with is to go and find the questions ahead of time, save them into a Word doc and draft those questions before you submit. I think everybody's always better from having reviewed it instead of just going straight in cold, submitting their first draft. Do stick to the word count for obvious reasons. They don't want to be sitting there for hours longer than they need to, and you want to make the best impression that you can. And do make sure you answer the question. So if you have generic cover letter content, it can be really tempting to just copy and paste it across. Check really carefully that it is appropriate to do that before you do it. Also, some might have activities. I think it was a very small number of firms, but the ones that do have quite chunky activities. So make sure you set aside the time and maybe sit in a quiet place and let people know, not to disturb you, because often they're timed. But other than making those kinds of preparations, don't overthink it too much. They're usually looking for just basic ability to communicate, write an email and basic research skills. They're not looking for you to be a grad level or an associate or partner, etc. They just want to see that you have some potential to work with. All right, stage two. I promise the rest of the stages are much smaller. That one was the most chunky by far. Stage two sometimes doesn't even apply for different firms. Some of them will take you straight from application to interview with nothing in between. If so, that's super. Others don't. So some of them will give you some psychometric testing to do, which is sort of psychologically based games. You can't really study for them, you just have to do them. Some of them will give you personality questionnaires. Again, ideally, you're not a psychopath, but like if you rig the test, there's not a lot that's benefiting you. You might as well just be honest. And some of them will have video interview questions. They can be a little bit more daunting just because they give you like one or two attempts and then they say, that's it, that's done. You're in whatever you've said to your camera. Is it? So maybe if you do have the firm or the couple of firms that have video interviews, it's a good idea to practice, maybe just talking to Zoom or calling somebody, just getting used to speaking to your camera like this, because it's not the most natural thing for us to do. Yeah, that's pretty much it though when it comes to stage two. So I'm just gonna keep on rolling through to stage three, which is the big guns, the interview. Everyone's interview is different. Everyone's experience, everyone's preparation is different. Some people want to be in the city for hours ahead of time. Some people might want to meet up with other people. Some people want to be alone. Figure out what works with you. Oh, wow, words. Figure out what works for you in terms of your nerves and making you the best you can be. The general rule in terms of getting to the firm itself is to arrive about 10 to 15 minutes early, and they will usually tell you that very specifically, so you don't need to worry about like overthinking it. In terms of what you need to wear, you can definitely ask our panelists this later if you want more specifics, but definitely make sure you're comfortable. Look neat, look professional, absolutely, but don't wear something that makes you, fidget with your shoes or have like blisters or, have a waistband that's too tight, whatever it is, just make sure it doesn't constrict your ability to be your best. Make sure you confirm if you need to bring something. I think in most cases you don't, but some of them want an academic transcript and or a passport to verify your right to work. If so, don't forget them. And then, yeah, be prepared and don't overthink. Easy for me to say, definitely didn't do this myself. But interviews are a vibe check. Like if you got to this stage, they've agreed you're very good and very capable and that all of you are able to do the job. They're now trying to figure out who you are as a person, whether you're a good fit for their culture and whether they'd enjoy working with you. So you might as well be your best self and your most authentic self, because in the long run, you're looking for a job and they're looking for someone who can do the job well at that firm. And if that synergy is not there, at the end of the day, it's best for both of you if that doesn't work out. So being yourself is really good. Preparing then for your interview as much as you can. So I think generally good advice is to have some examples of times where you've done certain things that can, show your strengths. Some of the ones I definitely prepped were examples of working under pressure, when you've managed someone who disagreed with you, when you've managed a difficult team dynamic, when you've taken initiative to improve a situation, when you've worked as part of a very successful team, so when it was a very good outcome and a good vibe. How did that happen? What role did you play in making it a good vibe? And then they often ask, when was the last time you stepped outside of your comfort zone? And how did that, change you as a person? And what did you learn from it? So I really sped through those. But in summary, it was just think of some examples, generally about teamwork, generally about leadership, initiative, pressure, that kind of thing. And it will really help you because if they're just example based, you can adapt them based on what specific question you get, which I think is better than having specific, I can't think of one on the top of my head, but really rigid question answers. These stories will generally help you a bit better. Okay, the ones that you do probably want to have a rigid answer for, these are ones I got pretty much everywhere personally. So why did you pursue law? It can be because you wanted to change the world or you cared about social justice, that's fine. I think they just want to check that you're here for the right reasons. They definitely want to hear why you want to work specifically in commercial law. Commerciality is a really big thing to them. And they want to see that it's not just about law for you, but it's kind of that interplay with social, political, legal issues, economic issues, that kind of thing more broadly. And then they definitely want to hear why it's them that you're interested in. Obviously, if you're interviewing in more than one place, you might not have an authentic interest in absolutely, each firm being your number one choice. But if you can, as much as possible, find the authentic reasons why you care about them and are interested, that will come across, I think, at least in my experience. Timing. So I know a lot of people work on the days they have the interview or they work full time. It can be really important to make sure you don't stack your interviews too close together though, because a lot of them will offer you a coffee with a grad right after, which I think is kind of expected that you'll take. It's also really valuable to take that time and just ask more questions or show more interest in the firm. So make sure you leave probably like an hour and a half at least between start to finish of arriving, doing your interview, having your coffee. I think each of those things individually takes about 30 minutes on average. In saying that, everyone is different, every firm is different, and they might run late, or you might have a great rapport with your grad and be there for an hour. So just be careful if you're stacking interviews or stacking interviews with other plans to leave enough time so that you're not stressed and running around between them. Final thing in interviews, and something I definitely did not realize was such a huge part of it, is they will invite you to cocktail evenings so that you can network with different potential clerks, with people at the firm, with HR, basically anybody involved in the process will be at these nights. These are great, but they are also quite a lot of your time when it comes to the clerkship process, because there will be usually one cocktail night per firm, and they're all doing them in the same sort of 2 weeks of the process. So you might have one almost every night, and that really can take time out of your week, more than you expect. So be aware of that fact, plan around them, make time for them, but they are wonderful when you get there, and they are a really fantastic place to learn more about, I guess, culture, to learn more about different practice groups, to have a chat to people from different practice groups and learn more about them. I know in my case, I didn't know I had an interest in employment until I went to a cocktail night, had a great chat to someone from employment, and then ended up working their team when I clerked. So you never know, you might have an interest for the rest of your life based on going to a cocktail night. So takeaway from this is definitely make time to go to them and really try and get the most you can out of them by speaking to people and putting yourself out there. Moving on to the final stage, the big one, the offer day. So offer day for you guys is Wednesday, the 12th of October. It's pretty easy to remember. You got 12th of August, 12th of October, sort of your bookends. Basically what's going to happen for you if you're still in the process and you've gone to interview and you're waiting for offers, they're going to be made over the phone between, I think it's from 8:30 onwards. Some firms it's like 9 o'clock onwards. Generally you'll hear from them sometime in the morning, but it really depends on their capacity or the person calling you. So don't stress if it's 10 o'clock and no one's called you, but do make sure you're available to answer your phone is the takeaway. Other than that, I guess tips for offer day, organize which season you'll be clerking. If you're lucky to get more than 2 or 3 offers and you need to kind of say no to people, you only have a day or so to kind of slot them all into place and make sure you can get to each of them at the time you want to, because they're filling up each season kind of on offer day. I know there was a big rush to try and get into autumn, I think, for one of my clerkships. So when I called and said, can I have summer please? They said, absolutely you can. Thank you so much. So just make sure you're on top of it so you don't get stuck in the unfortunate position of kind of having to choose 1 out of 2 of your offers when you could have got both of them if you were organized. You may want to have an idea of who you're vibing and who you might want to say yes to. I think you are able to say yes on the phone when they call you, but you also definitely can say, thank you very much, I'll call you later to let you know. So just have an idea of how you're going to play it so that you don't accidentally say yes to someone you didn't actually want to. And be kind to yourself. Like offer day can be a fantastic day. It can be a disappointing one, and it can be a bit of both. You have done a great job, whether you get to any of these stages, or even if you're just here showing up, having a go. So if you are feeling rejected or you're feeling like, really down on yourself, just know rejection is often not about you being a bad candidate. It's often more just that they have so many people and they're looking for what they think is the best fit at that time in people's career. So really back yourself. It's easier to say than it is to do, but definitely take steps. Okay, finally then, before we move to our Q&A, if you want more information, these are the places you should go to first. So always read the firm's website as your number one point of call. They are the ones who are telling you what they want you to apply with. So whether it's cover letter, whether it's not, they will tell you also their cutoff days. Most of them follow the QLS guidelines, which means it's the 12th of August. Some of them won't though. So just make sure you're checking if you're really interested in a firm that they don't have a different deadline. If you have more questions, you can look up the Queensland Law Society guidelines. They have a whole page on all the dates and offer days and grad process for the next 4 years. It's really confusing, actually. So good luck. But they do have a lot of information there as well. I know a lot of firms are also hosting their own clerkship sessions so that they can, tell you more about their culture, answer your questions directly, because obviously I don't work at all the firms, can't tell you about all of them. But they're really good to go to as well, also to show face and show interest. And you can always contact HR if you have questions about their program or if you want to know more about their firm, etc. In terms of what we can do for you, so we are hosting a professional networking event specifically for clerkships and the grad program and commercial law. It's happening next Tuesday. I think it's at 5:30 arrival. So it's at 480 Queen Street on the top level, so level 32. Beautiful venue, and all tickets are now $15 for students because we have use the society money to heavily subsidize it so that as many people as possible can go. We also are offering equity tickets, so you can apply and RT4 will confidentially look at them and generally be able to give you either some money or a full free paid for ticket. So I highly recommend coming to that so you can have a bit of a network. I think we have every major firm, maybe bar one or two. So pretty much anybody you might want to talk to about clerkships will definitely be there. And it's a really good opportunity to, have a little look at the field, ask questions, get to know them. One final thing is our career guide is coming out soon. I don't have the cover art actually yet for this one, so this is last year's, but it will have a lot of the same information that I've told you today, plus some broader information about grad programs or other programs outside of commercial law. So really highly recommend keeping an eye out on our Facebook for that one as well. And then that's it. I'm going to ask Jazz now to stop the recording and we'll move to our